when you realize that you are the life force within the body, and your body is the vehicle through which you get to experience this lifetime, through which you get to express your uniqueness in this world, right? So when you realize that the body is like your one vehicle for being the manifestation of that light that you have within you, then you really need to take responsibility for how you care for everything you put into this body, everything you eat, everything you drink, everything you think, everything you say. Every cell in your body is paying attention. So even when you don't say things out loud, the very act of thinking something, the cells are already attuning to what you're thinking about. So you need to be very mindful of that. And the greatest thing I learned, because I was sent on this trajectory to go and learn neuroscience. So I did my master's studies in neuroscience, and nothing made sense about doing that. But now I realize why I had to do that. And I realized that I needed to understand the science underneath how we create our reality and how powerful our thoughts and our words are in creating our experience of reality.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Josie, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think you have a powerful story and you have a lot of insight and wisdom. So I truly mean that. I'm not just saying that. So thanks for coming on. Before we get started, maybe you could share a little bit about what you do and who you are, if you don't mind, briefly.
Well, that's a funny question, because a lot of times when you ask people to introduce themselves, they start launching into, the roles they play in the world and the jobs they have. And so if you want that story, I can give you that story. Otherwise, I can say that, I'm a seeker of truth and I'm on the path of awakening my consciousness as well as the consciousness of others. In my everyday life, I'm a mother of two. I'm a coach. I'm a mentor. I'm a meditation teacher. I'm an author. I'm also a 2 times cancer survivor. On a quest to live life as fully as I can.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I should have said the I and then the I within the I of who you are. You have a couple near-death experiences that I would love for you to touch on and talk about. Maybe before we get to your near-death experiences, the first one, you could share a little bit about who you were before that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Your life on an everyday basis before that happened.
All right. Okay, so 24 years old. I am the eldest daughter of a large Italian family. And there's a lot of beautiful ritual and cultural customs associated with being Italian. Along with that, there's also a sense of obligation and duty, depending on your position in the family. So as the eldest daughter, there's a fair bit of responsibility in terms of, if mum was away in hospital unwell, I became the matriarch in the family, cooking, cleaning, looking after kids. Dad's off to work. And I was a very young child when that was all going on. So that sense of inbuilt responsibility was there from a very, very young age. And I guess there's a lot of respect for your elders as well when you grow up in a very close-knit Italian culture. And it's a beautiful thing to have. When overused, all of our strengths can actually become weaknesses. So when you become compliant and obedient, you can become a pleaser of others. And in the consequence of that is you start losing your own voice. And that's what was happening to me. So in 1991, I was super fit, never drank, never smoked, just a little bit of my dad's vino, and I was very, very healthy. And I was working in a corporate environment. And one day I noticed there was a little bit of discomfort in my throat. I couldn't swallow properly. And it was like a little lump, but it wasn't any pain. It was no pain. And I kind of let it go for several weeks and it wasn't going away. And then I thought I better get it checked out. So I did. And the doctors thought, oh, maybe it's glandular fever. So they did an ultrasound, but they discovered that there was a tumor in the right lobe of my thyroid. So they said, listen, given your age and your lifestyle, we're not going to worry about a biopsy. Let's just go ahead and take it out. So thinking it was nothing, I went ahead with the surgery to remove the right lobe. But unfortunately, they discovered that it was malignant stage 3 cancer. And as a consequence of that, I had to have a second surgery very, very quickly after that first one. The thing is, at 24 years old, back in 1991, boo-boo, you barely heard the word cancer, right? Yeah. It was something that I knew. An auntie on my mother's side, I think, had breast cancer, but it was one person of everyone that I'd ever known. And I hadn't actually heard that word used very often. And if you did use that word back then, there was this automatic fear instilled in you because people assumed that meant you were going to die. And so I heard the words and it felt like an out-of-body experience. It just felt surreal. It wasn't happening to me. It was just information. And the doctor looked at me and he said, do you understand what I've just said to you? I said, yes. And he said, well, because we've disturbed it, we need to get in there pretty quickly to remove the rest of your thyroid just in case it's already started to spread, and it had. And he said, well, when can we do this? And I knew I did not need time to think. And I said to him, if you don't do this by first thing tomorrow morning, you're not going to get another chance to do this. So he was able to organize it for first thing in the morning, had the second surgery. But as a consequence of that, I had lost a lot of blood and I was in intensive care unconscious for about a week and a half, nearly 2 weeks. And I was in and out of consciousness. And throughout that whole time, I was perfectly aware of what was happening around me, about every conversation that was had, even though my physical body was unconscious. So I could tell you where everyone was sitting, where my family were visiting, who said what to whom. And it's still like yesterday. I can see them there, right? And it was also this time where I experienced my first near-death experience. And at that time, I'd never heard of an NDE. I didn't know what it was. But essentially what happened was an aspect of my consciousness rose out of my physical form. So there was an aspect of me floating up at the ceiling, looking down at my physical body. So I was aware that I was here and I was here. But there was no judgment, there was no fear, there was no freaking out, there was no panic. It was just this real serene observation, being able to have this knowing that I was here and I was here and I was just floating here. And I watched as the screen went flat, so my physical body died. And the nurses came running in and revived me. And at the same time, while observing that, this big male voice came in and said, it's not your time yet. And with that, I was straight back into my physical form. And that happened 2 times over that 2-week period. And it was something that I didn't know if I'd just made up. I didn't know if I could talk about it without people thinking I was just it was a drug-induced, phenomena. But I knew it was real. And I knew it had happened. I mean, you can't make that stuff up. And then I started wanting to read everything I could about cancer and about near-death experiences. And I realized it was actually something that a lot of people had experienced. I didn't feel so loony, you know.
Wow, that's amazing. So going back to the second eye, the eye within the eye, who are we really?
Oh, wow.
You know,
That's a big question, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I've had a shared death experience, and I didn't have that terminology until I started this podcast. I would always say in 12-step meetings when I'm asked to go share my story, I would say I tapped into my father's consciousness when he died, and I seen everything outside of my body, so I can relate to what you're saying. But it's weird because I'm still in my body, but I'm outside of my body. Because I seen everything. I seen me moving, holding my father. I seen me crying. I seen the ambulance. I seen the whole scene, but I'm outside of my body, and I'm still looking at myself in the body. I don't know. It was weird. So I totally understand what you're saying. So thank you for sharing that. Going to your second near-death experience, what happened there?
Well, the second one was close to the first one. It was exactly the same. But then I had a third one last year.
Oh, wow.
That was totally unrelated. Do you want me to launch into that one?
Yeah, but before we do, you talked about cancer, and I know you've gave talks on cancer, and there's a lot of people suffering from cancer, a lot of loved ones, and people that are watching me have a loved one right now suffering from cancer. And you said it was rarely used in those days. Why do you think it's manifesting so much in today's world? It's become normal to get, in a sense. Do you have any words for someone that's has a loved one suffering from cancer? Because it's hard to deal with. It really is.
I have a lot to say on this topic. There's a lot of different angles that I could take on this. If you have a look at how society and lifestyle choices have evolved, it's not surprising that the incidences of cancer are increasing. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is that cancer is the body's distress signal that something is way out of whack, way out of alignment. And I do believe that depending on where the cancer is located, there is a specific, particular lesson that the body has been trying desperately to alert you to, and it hasn't been acknowledged. So for me, the first cancer was here in my throat, and it was all about speaking up. The block was suppression. I wasn't able to express myself, to own my own truth, to say what I really wanted to say because of that, expectation around duty and obligation and pleasing and appeasing others that I respected and held in high regard. Yeah. So that was really the catalyst to me to find my own voice, to discover my own truths, and to start to express that. The second time for me was a lesion in my brain, and that was literally about getting out of my head. I used to overthink and overanalyze everything, and this was an invitation for me because after this surgery, I couldn't walk or talk properly for 6 months. So it was a time where I was forced into being more still and more silent than I normally am. And that was an invitation to go the longest yet the greatest distance from head to heart, yeah, and start tuning into a deeper truth, a deeper wisdom, a deeper knowing that I would not have otherwise accessed unless I was given that opportunity to be still. And I often say that change in life is inevitable. It's how we get to learn and grow. Yet it's the thing that we most oppose because it means getting out of our comfort zone. And when we get out of our comfort zone, it's uncomfortable and it's unfamiliar. And there's a bit of fear that comes up because we don't know what we don't know. But the brain likes to anticipate the worst, right? But when we go into fear, there's an absence of love. And the thing we have to realize is that love is to fear what light is to darkness. Yeah. Once you put the light on, the darkness disappears. Once you turn on the love, the fear disappears. So the thing that I've learned about cancer is that even the very word can elicit a sense of fear. And what we need to do is return to a sense of love. Do not fight against yourself. The cancer is part of this physical form once you have it. So once you fight something, you're fighting yourself. It is a desperate plea for love and understanding. And when you get that, you can alchemize the chemistry in your body for miracles. And I'm proof of that.
Thank you. I love that. I mean, a lot of times, and I don't know where you're at, but it's pretty common in the States where you see a sticker every so often, someone will say F cancer. But we have to, instead of saying F cancer, and I totally understand what they're saying, but we have to take a step back and try to understand and question and try to develop a deeper insight of what's creating this cancer within us. So thank you for touching on that. I know it's a touchy subject.
It's a very touchy subject because no one wants to stand there and say, well, I chose to have cancer. I manifested the cancer. No one wants to say that, but the body, going back to your first question around who are you? When you realize that you are not the body, right? When you realize that you are the life force within the body and your body is the vehicle through which you get to experience this lifetime, through which you get to express your uniqueness in this world, right? So when you realize that the body is like your one vehicle for being the manifestation of that light that you have within you, then you really need to take responsibility for how you care for everything you put into this body. Everything you eat, everything you drink, everything you think, everything you say, every cell in your body is paying attention. So even when you don't say things out loud, the very act of thinking something, the cells are already attuning to what you're thinking about. So you need to be very mindful of that. And the greatest thing I learned, because I was sent on this trajectory to go and learn neuroscience. So I did my master's studies in neuroscience and nothing made sense about doing that. But now I realize why I had to do that. And I realized that I needed to understand the science underneath how we create our reality and how powerful our thoughts and our words are in creating our experience of reality. So here's an example. Oftentimes when something happens, we can say, hey, isn't that great? Or we can say, hey, I don't want that. But the second you say, I don't want something, or I don't want to experience something, you're already starting to manifest and attract the conditions for experiencing the very thing you don't want. So here's an example. If I said to you, okay, join me on stage and share with these people your life story. And as you start to approach the stage, you're saying to yourself, I don't want to be nervous. 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 Guess what? You're already there. Right? Yeah. Just by focusing your attention on the very thing you don't want, you have actually amplified the very thing you don't want. The saying is where focus goes, energy flows. So what you think of the longest becomes the strongest. So if by focusing on what you don't want attracts the very thing you don't want, how do you get what you do want? It's actually not difficult. It's not hard, but you're going against the grain of the brain. The brain is wired to be on the lookout for threats. The number one priority of the brain is safety, to feel secure. And so when something's going on in your life where it's actually not allowing your sense of safety or security, the brain is going to be agitated and disturbed. and is constantly going to have you looking behind your back going, am I safe? Is it okay? Is this all right? And so until you can create a sense of safety, the brain won't allow you to focus forward on your happiness and what you really want to manifest in life. So when I was going through cancer, I became very aware of energy. So I started to realize that all of a sudden, if I got scared of the situation I was in, that was making me feel worse. But if I started thinking about what I wanted, not pretending I'm well because I wasn't well, but wanting to be well, right? Then all of a sudden, my thoughts started to change. The way I spoke started to change, and the choices I made started to change in the direction of my focus. So instead of thinking, I don't want to die, and that thought was there every single day, I was thinking, okay, thank you, brain, for reminding me of what I don't want. What is it that I do want? Well, I want to live. And just by making that refocus step and saying, I want to live, then all of a sudden my thoughts were aligning with that orientation. So my thoughts were healthier. My choices were healthier. My actions were healthier in the direction of, I want to live. So I could ask myself, if I eat this, is this actually creating a toward step in that direction, or is this actually feeding my fear? So I knew the healthy choices to make. I knew what I should or shouldn't eat because I was focusing on living, right? When I was focusing on not dying, then you get desperate. You don't think straight, and you can make unhealthy choices to try to numb yourself or to appease yourself or comfort yourself in some way, but you're just making it worse. You're feeding the fear. And that's something really, really important to realize, and is probably the number one lesson I got from learning neuroscience, is that the way we focus our attention has a direct effect on the quality of life we get to experience and manifest.
Yeah, thank you. Marianne Williamson often says a miracle is a shift in perception from fear to love. And that's how we create miracles, is through love, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of dwelling in fear. You talked about alchemizing our conditions through conscious language, and I love that. And the power of I am, I would love you to tie that in with, there's a saying, thank God for neuroplasticity. I would love for you to tie that all in because, I come from the 12-step community.
Yes.
And a lot of times I started to say, you know what, saying I am an alcoholic over and over is dangerous. It's for the mind and the body.
Yeah.
It can create disease. It can create sickness, illness. It's unhealthy. And so I'd love for you to touch on the power of the mind and how that works.
So when you're in recovery, I get what they're trying to do, and that is to acknowledge the truth of who you have been. So maybe you have been, I have been an alcoholic is actually a true statement.
Yes.
The fact that you're healing from it, it allows you to say, yeah, I have been that, but that's not who I am today.
Yes.
And I am, once you say whatever you want to say after the words I am, is very powerful. Because like I said to you before, your body's like a tuning fork. It's like, I am scared, I am safe, I am happy, I am unwell. You can actually, it's called priming, right? So if you say in the morning, I'm going to have a great day today, guess what? Your brain is going to look for evidence to support that priming, to confirm and create a happy day. But if you wake up in the morning and say, oh, here we go again, well, guess what? You're going to create that. So it's extremely powerful. And the way I say to people, when you're trying to change a habit, say, for example, I don't want to feel inadequate anymore. So that's what you don't want. So remember what I said before about the I don't versus I do, right? So if that's what I don't want, thank you, brain, for reminding me for the 100th time today what I don't want. What is it that I do want? That's all you got to do. Don't fight it. Don't deny it. Don't suppress it. Don't push it away, because these are normal, natural human thoughts that the brain constructs in a desperate attempt to get its number one priority, which is safety. It doesn't know how to get it any other way. You have to train it to start thinking more adaptively. So you just look at it and go, okay, thank you for reminding me what I don't want. What is it that I do want? So I want to feel more comfortable. I want to feel more calm. And what I say to people when they're trying to build confidence in themselves, instead of saying, I am confident, or focusing on confidence, focus on calm. And the reason I say that is if you can create a sense of calmness in your body, in your mind, then you have clarity. And what does that clarity give you? Confidence, because you can think straight. Yeah. So I think the number one priority for all of us to create within ourselves is a sense of calm and peace, and obviously love. And sometimes love can be a big step for people that have had a lifetime of self-defeating thoughts and not treating themselves very well. So the first step might be start liking yourself, just something about yourself, anything about yourself. Oh, I like my little finger. Great. How awesome is this little finger? Actually, I don't mind my right knuckle too. That's okay. Like just anything. Start building relationship with yourself. Start liking yourself, because what you'll realize is, notice how you treat people you like. And what if you could have that relationship with you? Everything changes. And eventually that like turns into love. What's not to love?
I love that. You know, when I first started to question things in the 12-step community, I started to pray and meditate and ask for, some clear answers, right? And one day I walk into, a couple of days later, I walk into a Barnes Noble, and all of a sudden a book's staring at me. I just felt like everything got dimmer and this book's looking at me. That's how I felt. And it happened to me twice, one with Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God, early on, and then the second one was with Joe Dispenza. But when I open up the book, Joe Dispenza talks about how our thoughts are the language of the mind and our emotions are the language of the body. And I started to take a step back and like, holy crap, how am I talking to myself? What kind of language is my mind and body speaking, right? And then I open up a Bruce Lipton book, Biology of Belief, and he talks about how fear has the opposite effect. Fear and love have the opposite effect on our mind and body. I started to get all these answers really quick, so I constantly got to be cautious with the way I think and the way I speak to myself and with others. So yeah, I appreciate you talking about that stuff. How do you the voice in the head, that inner critic? What are some practices to create a better conversation within the self? And how do we know the difference between intuition and the voice in the head or the ego?
It's pretty easy, actually, because your true self doesn't want to hurt you. You know, who you truly are doesn't want you to feel bad about yourself. There's only one person in your head, but there's two voices, right? And one is the inner critic. But if you see the inner critic as your inner child that doesn't know what it doesn't know and needs you, the real you, to come forward and embrace those fearful thoughts and narratives with love and say, hey, I'm here. All of a sudden, the fear starts to settle and you just calm down. And then you ask yourself, if I wasn't scared, if I wasn't fearful, what would I do?
I love that. I always say, spirituality is not always about worshiping some deity up in the sky. It's really about creating health. and inner peace within oneself. And it starts with taking responsibility for our own thoughts and our own actions. So I really appreciate what you're saying, especially with the science part. I always say, science without spirituality is incomplete, and spirituality without science is ignorance. So I think it all goes together.
Well, I think the worlds are starting to come together. I think to be honest, I think there has always been a connection, but not one that was overtly communicated and shared with everybody. And funding wasn't often generously offered to matters of spirituality, because it wasn't tangible. Whereas now I think there's more inquiry, and there are, this new breed of scientists coming through that is more open to exploring and making cases for exploring these other dimensions, not just the physical.
Mm. Be understanding this human condition, how important is it to live on some form of a spiritual basis or mindful way of living for us as an individual?
I think my own opinion is that I see that society has been losing its way because it's been losing its connection to spirituality or some kind of faith. So I'm not talking about religion and doctrines here. I'm talking about, say, Christian values and having something bigger than you to believe in. It's, otherwise you're walking around thinking that it's all about you. Right? Well, what are you here for? It's only about you and your material gain and wealth. Actually, is there anything that you're here to contribute for the greater good, for others? And I think this is the opportunity that anyone that has experienced any form of adversity has. And that is that there is an awakening that occurs in consciousness as a consequence of having those experiences. And when that occurs, there are two choices. You can either become bitter, that you can see these events and circumstances as happening to you, or you can become better, where you can see these things as happening for you in some way. Comfortable? No. Easy? No. Painful? Yes. Guess what? That's how growth happens. Yeah? We don't grow in our comfort zone. But once we get that lesson, it's like you're not that person you were before anymore. You are actually now stronger and wiser, right? And you've decided now to be better, not bitter. And by doing that, by making that choice, you become of greater service now to others who may be walking that very same path, because you've been through it. You've survived. Now you can become a helper for others.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions I would love to ask you is, how can neuroscience help support someone that's suffering from addiction or alcoholism?
Well, you mentioned before neuroplasticity, and one of my very good friends is Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz. He is the author of Brain Lock, You Are Not Your Brain, Mind and the Brain, many really amazing books. And he's the leading neuroscientist in the world on obsessive compulsive disorder. And he has a program, it's a 4-step process that he has taught for decades, that we have taught together as well, where we share with people how you can move from bad habits and unhealthy thinking into a place of well-being and partnership with what he calls your wise advocate, that inner loving guide, that inner voice that loves you, cares for you, and wants the best for you. So it is possible. And every time you break a pattern, because that's what these really strong urges and and cravings are. They're patterns that have been repeated and repeated and repeated over time that now have become what's called hardwiring in the brain. And when it becomes hardwiring, a loop of habit, it becomes an unconscious program. So you don't have to think about it. Your body knows exactly where the medicine cabinet is or where the glass is, the alcohol is, and off you go. You're not thinking about it. It's a pattern. And just as you've wired in that pattern over many repetitions over the years, you can create a new one. And that's what neuroplasticity is. The key, though, is it's not about breaking a pattern. It's about creating a new pattern and embedding that with focus, repetition, and positive reinforcement. And that's how you create a new habit, a new pattern. So you don't focus on fighting or breaking a habit. You focus on creating a new. That's what neuroplasticity is.
So act your way into better thinking there's a lot of truth to that.
Absolutely. But you've got to just watch. You know how we were saying before the I am, right? Say, for example, there's something you really want to believe about yourself, but you're not quite there yet. What would that be for you, Boo-Boo?
Could you ask that question one more time?
So a belief that you want to own about yourself, but you're not quite there yet.
That I want to own about myself that I'm not quite there yet. That's a good question. Ooh, nothing's popping up right now at this moment.
So it could be I am confident. Can we play with that one?
Yeah, you're right. I am confident because a lot of times that what pops up is I'm not good enough.
Okay, great. Let's go with that one. Okay. So you want to believe I am good enough, but you know that there's this little voice that goes, who are you kidding? You know why? Because it's not 100% true. You want to believe it, but it's not a 100% true belief right now. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yes.
So basically, the way it works is you want to believe that I am good enough, right? But if there's even 1% that says, I don't buy that, well, then it's not going to work. So the way around it is to say to yourself, I'm in the process.
I'm in the process.
Of being good enough.
Of being good enough.
Yeah.
And then when you say that, is like kind of no doubt, really.
There's no doubt.
You're inviting that door to open and walk into it.
No doubt at all.
Huh.
So whatever it is that you want to believe about yourself, I am good enough. Well, yeah, no. Right? That little critic's going to get in that 1% that says, I don't believe you. But if you say, I'm in the process of being good enough, then all of a sudden, all of it goes, yep, I'm on board with that because that's a true statement. You are in the process of being good enough. I'm in the process of being more than good enough. I'm in the process of loving myself completely. I'm in the process of having a happy life. I'm in the process of loving myself. Whatever it is, you put those words in front and the brain will not resist. So that means all your resources will get behind you and support you towards that outcome.
Yeah, thank you. The placebo effect, that's pretty powerful. When I learned the definition behind it, I shall please, and the nocebo effect is I shall harm. I thought that was interesting when I first read that definition.
Yeah, I like to simplify it even more. It's like saying, hey, take this magic pill and you're going to feel 100% better tomorrow. And the fact that you believe me, you take that pill and you believe in this thing. I'm going to call it the placebo because it's just a sugar tablet. Actually, I don't want to give you sugar. I'm just going to give you this little tablet that you can suck on. It's going to make you feel 100% better. You believe me and you believe in this thing. And then everything in you says, I'm going to feel 100% better tomorrow. Guess what? You've created that. And this thing was actually neutral. There was nothing in it that would actually give you that outcome other than your belief. And then the nocebo is like saying to you, I could prime you right? Oh, you're looking terrible today. Oh, you must be really sick. Are you coming down with something? And it's the same thing that I can convince you into creating that condition because you've placed your belief in something that I've said and then attuned to that vibration and lowered your own frequency to create that.
I love that. It's kind of like that old scripture. There were, and I don't remember it word for word, but where Jesus, someone touched him and they were healed, and he said, "It wasn't me; it was your faith. It's the power of belief, and it has nothing to do with the outer; it's the inner power
Yeah.
within us, right?"
Yeah. I remember I was interviewed on a television program once with a woman whose brother had been diagnosed with the same cancer I had. And she said to me, you know, because I was given 6 months to live and I did not believe it. I didn't deny it. I didn't believe it, right? There was something in me that went, that's not a true statement. It's what you think. Give me proof that that's true. And he couldn't do that. So that gave me enough of a gap in the game to go for what I wanted, which was to live. So I made some pretty major drastic changes in my life to create conditions to maximize the potential for my healing. And I'm still here.
Mm.
But this woman said, you know, my brother was given 6 months to live and he died to the day of the 6-month period that he was given. And again, that's priming. You know, you can believe yourself to that.
Yeah, you're right. And so it's kind of robotic and sometimes dangerous. Sometimes when doctors will say you only got 6 months to live, you got to take a step back and really go within, right? You shouldn't just believe it automatically.
The thing about that, boo-boo, is that, you know, when someone puts on a white coat and a stethoscope, they have a position of power.
Mm.
And we trust that. However, we have an inner authority that knows what truth is to us. And we have to grow our relationship with our body to be able to attune to the resonance of when something doesn't feel right. Because when something doesn't feel right, it's because it's not right.
Mm.
Don't use your intellect to figure it out. If the body is giving you a sense something doesn't feel right here, it's because it's not right. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, thank you. You said something profound recently. I heard recently from you, and I had someone else on recently, and they said something similar. The difference between the soul and the spirit. Is there a difference?
Yes, there's a massive difference. So to me, the soul is your life force energy. Yeah. It's the light, the spark of the divine that you were birthed into being. Your spirit is your expression in this life, your personality, how you express your soul in this lifetime.
Yeah, thank you. Um, a lot of people use it as the same thing a lot of times, but there is a difference.
Yes, well, in my last near-death experience, I actually saw this grid, like a matrix, coming up and out of my body, and it was this beautiful golden color. And I was trying to work out what it was. Like my body was unconscious. I was in toxic shock in the hospital bed. And then there was this beautiful white vortex light coming into the room, retrieving this golden matrix from this physical body. And I was looking at this because there was an aspect of me perfectly awake and aware of what was going on. And I was like, wait, hang on, am I dying here? This was my soul grid coming up and out of my body. And I'd never seen it before. And that's when I realized, that was the program that I was birthed to experience and remember in this lifetime. It was incredible to be able to see that and go, oh, that's the soul. I get it.
Were you ever given any life reviews?
I didn't get to that point. I didn't get
Okay.
to that point. I interfered.
But how has these NDEs changed your outlook on life?
I would have to say totally, because once you've had an experience like that, you have a knowing of life beyond this three-dimensional experience that we have been taught is the only existence and reality that there is. And once you touch that, it's kind of your inquiry towards those other dimensions becomes heightened.
Mm.
You want to know more because you know more, you understand more, you've seen more, you've experienced more. You can't unknow what you now know. And so the way you look out at the world changes completely because you know there's more than this.
You know, in the Hindu scriptures, they talk a lot about that. It talks about how we don't die, the self, the capital S. And you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse how like the soul, the self cannot be wet, it cannot be burned. The self never dies. Therefore, you should not grieve. But it's so hard not to grieve for a loved one, even though like we know to the core of our being that there's no such thing as death. Who we really are doesn't die. The physical does, but it's still, I think it's still beautiful in a way to be able to grieve for someone, missing them in form. How do you help people, or how have you dealt with grief of a death of a loved one?
Oh, look, grief is a sacred process. And I don't think people should not grieve. I think grief is a measure of the love you had for the person who has now departed in physical form. So all the theory in the world does not save you from experiencing grief. Because like I still have moments of grief for a beloved uncle that died in 2022.
Mm.
You know, just last night I was dancing with him in my lounge room and crying, one moment in sadness and the next moment in ecstasy, just realizing that the depth of that grief broke open my awareness to the illusion of separation.
Mm.
So somehow we're able to alchemize that grief in time into gratitude for that love that we experienced. You know, it's profound. And you realize that even today, 2.5 years later, I can feel that eternal nature of his love.
Mm.
How is that possible? Right? And that when you start to think about that, you realize that that's actually what truth is. That's what love is. It's eternal. It transcends time, place, physicality. And that is our true nature.
Mm.
And so for me, our mission is to remember that we are here to love, to be loved, and to leave that footprint of love so that that's the gift of this life for all those that you've touched in this lifetime.
I love that. Thank you. Do you have a regular practice for dealing with everyday stress in life? Like, do you have a meditation practice, or what kind of tools do you use on a regular basis to deal with life?
Yeah, I think the first few minutes of your day are really critical for setting up the tone or the vibration, if you like, for your day. So before you reach any device, you know, sit still. For me, I go out into my backyard. I put my bare feet on the grass and the rising sun is right in front of me. So I sit in quiet just for 2 or 3 minutes, allowing myself just to be fully present and allowing the light to be absorbed by my body as well. And I smile and I say, thank you. And I think about what I'm grateful for. Thank you for a new day. Thank you for this breath. Thank you for this now moment. Thank you for the feeling of the grass beneath my feet. Thank you for the support that I have all around me. Thank you for the invisible support that I know I have every single day. Thank you for allowing me to be a blessing to all those I come into contact with today. There is so much to be grateful for. And so that's how I start my day, and that's how I end my day, the same way, saying thank you.
Getting grounded, right?
Yeah, getting grounded and expanding that feeling of love in my heart that then permeates every cell in my body and allows every cell to smile with me as well.
You know what Thich Nhat Hanh said, the Zen master? He once said, may every step I take be as if I'm kissing the earth with my feet. I love that.
Love that. Yeah.
Uh, you said you had a male voice speak to you a couple of times. Do you believe we all have some kind of guides or angels? Who was that male voice for you?
So that male voice for me was Archangel Gabriel. And Archangel Gabriel has been around me since I was a little child. And then I forgot. Life got busy. I got ridiculed for having empty seats beside me because I would say, no, you can't sit here, my archangel's sitting here. And people would say, oh, don't be so silly. And they would sit there. And then eventually I just felt smashed. You know, that belief just got smashed and I just forgot. And then I was reminded, and now I remember. So I attune to that voice every day. And whenever I need guidance, I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Show me. You know, and the thing that I say, Boo Boo, is if you knew how big that invisible army is around you every single day, you would never be frightened.
You know what I find interesting is when you try to talk to this kind of conversation to people in spiritual communities, a lot of times they think you're crazy if you talk about angels or unseen beings. I don't understand why. Do you find that kind of odd for not being
Are
able to
you,
speak about this stuff to people
are
in
you
spiritual
talking
communities?
about spiritual or religious communities?
Both. I think both at times. Not everyone, but
Mm.
I mean, sometimes these conversations are not welcomed.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own path, and you know it's important that you allow people to have their own path and honor your own.
Mhm. Is there a difference between religion and spirituality for you?
Yes, spirituality is not limited by a set of doctrines and rules. You know, a lot of religions have their own guidelines that you must adhere to for their version of God to love and accept and welcome you into his house. Whereas spirituality, you start realizing, well, you know the nature of God, and that is love. You know the nature of God, and that is forgiveness. You know the nature of God, and that is peace. And you're not perfect. You are innocent. And everyone is a child of God, and everyone is innocent, worthy of forgiveness and worthy of love.
I love that. Thank you. I love the root word for religion means to reconnect or rebind, right? Which is beautiful, like similar to yoga, unite, union, a recovery to get back, our true essence that we've forgotten about. We always had it, just forgotten about it, right? But the dogma and the belief systems that create division is the problem for me. Because I think they all share the same core beautiful principles that we have in spirituality. It's just the belief systems that divide people. We're right and you're wrong mentality can be harmful.
I think it's important that everybody remembers that we are one humanity. One humanity.
You're right. Oftentimes, even in Christianity, for an example, you hear we're all God's children, but sounds pretty at the time, but it seems like people forget. It's a constant remembrance, I guess. Yeah, thank you. How do you look at heaven or hell?
Heaven and hell is what we created for ourselves. Those self-defeating thoughts, we're in hell. Heaven we can create in an instant. I don't believe there is a hell. It's only a self-constructed hell. Heaven is living in this moment in love and in the remembering of that light and love that we are.
I love that. Do you believe in reincarnation?
Yes.
I think it makes more sense to me, versus just one life. What would you say the purpose is for reincarnation?
I believe that it's about the soul's evolution. And so each time you come back and there's a new line added to that matrix that you need to learn. And so for me, what I've realized, it's about remembering your soul's trainings and talents and gifts from every lifetime into this lifetime, and then being able to bring that forward to another dimension, another layer of expression and experience for the betterment of humanity.
I love that. I love talking about that because maybe if we start to understand reincarnation a little bit more, maybe it'll stop. Maybe would be less and less discriminating towards someone's spacesuit, like racism and stuff. That kind of doesn't make sense. The more you, at least for me, the more I could have some kind of questioning and understanding about reincarnation. Like I might have been a female that was Asian at one time, or black or white, or it doesn't matter. Like this is just a spacesuit. I think we forget to see the life force within each and every one of us. So I think that's an important topic, at least for me.
Well, if you saw everybody as your brother or your sister, it would change everything. And you genuinely come in from a place of love, and to be able to see with the soul's eyes, all you would see is love and people doing their best with where they're at and what they know.
Yeah, thank you. In neuroscience, I've seen a study where it says we have about 60,000 thoughts that flow through our mind per day. I'm like, wow. And they said about 10% are new ones, which is powerful, which means we become robotic or on autopilot a lot of times as being a human being. How do we expand that versus the 10%? How do we make it 20% or 30%?
Well, we need to become conscious creators. We need to come out of the automatic pilot that we're in, because most of our days is just a repeat of what we did yesterday. How we get up in the morning, the routines you have, how you get to work, how you go about your work. So if you are seeking to learn something new every day, to see something new every day, you will. And that's how you start to create a greater percentage in that conscious creating space.
Thank you. Do you have any last words for us? Something you want to touch on?
I love to say to people that it's not what happens to you that defines you. It's how you respond that really matters. You always have choice, bitter or better.
How important is it to change your perspective or constantly question it? I love what Wayne Dyer always says: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Has that helped you?
Totally, because what has occurred for me with all the experiences that I've had is that I'm much more sensitive to the information that my body's giving me. So there's two types of messages. One is ease, and so your body feels quite relaxed and expanded. And then there's one where it contracts and something doesn't feel so good. And so that's when you need to start to pay attention, because your body's trying to communicate something to you about the environment, maybe a thought, maybe something you've just ingested that's not good or right for your body. So I think getting into relationship with your physical body is extremely important, to start to cultivate greater love and peace in your world and therefore the world around you.
I love that. So to know thyself, that's a pretty deep saying, right?
Know thyself, love thyself, be thyself.
And all is the self. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to end it with one of your quotes. I love your page, and if you guys are listening, check out her Instagram because you have a lot of beautiful quotes. So I appreciate it. And I was scrolling through them earlier, and you said, "Give yourself a makeover. Start with your internal real estate and enjoy experiencing more of heaven on earth." Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Take care. Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.